Hello! Today we're going to talk about how to make scales sound good on the guitar. It's one of those things, you practice loads of scales, you got to learn the scales, playing them up and down. But they don't always sound good. In fact, they kind of sound like scales. I learned to play classical instruments as a kid, and they teach you just to play scales like the most boring thing in the world. It was like... And honestly, it's not great. Why do we learn scales? Well, it's some building blocks of theory. There's all sorts of technique that's useful. But the real reason we learn the scales, if you're on guitar especially, but it should be to learn to solo, should be to learn to make some melodies. We need to do something contextual to actually get good at making scales sound good on the guitar. So today, I'm going to give you some tips for getting scales to actually sound good on your guitar. So my notes are up here. Tip number 1. This one's really about your brain. Honestly, with scales, it's a war of attrition. The more you play the scales, the better you'll get at them. And the only reason that you can't play scales the way you want is because you haven't played them enough yet, you haven't explored with them enough yet. And so the only thing I want to tell you first, before you do all the other ones, which are very practical, is you can do this. Every single person can. Doesn't matter whether you think you're talented or not, it really is just a war of attrition. If you think you're talented, great, good for you. Maybe you have the good genes. If you don't think you're talented, well, you're all you've got. And let's face it, there's a lot of guitar and a lot of music to play, and only so much life left. So let's get going. The faster you get good at scales, the better you'll get, and the more you'll just enjoy guitar for the rest of your life. So when you're learning scales, you often end up learning patterns on the guitar, and you first problem, especially on the guitar, people think, or any other instrument, is, I have to know them everywhere. When you want to make them sound good, you actually want to do the opposite thing. So when you're learning broad areas, sure, you learn broad areas. When you make them sound good, you focus in on small parts. And really, the thing that has to get good first, or work on first, is your ear, because you will never be able to outplay your ear and your hearing ability. So you have to slow down your playing to be just small areas of the guitar, so that you can play those small areas better. So I'll give you an example. This is the G major scale on the guitar. So I'm playing, there's all sorts of ways you could play it, but I'm playing fret 3, 5, 7, 3, 5, 7, 4, 5, 7, 4, 5, 7, 5, 7, 8, 5, 7, 8, with a small mistake in there. As you're playing that, that's a huge amount of scale to learn, and people often sit there, and it sounds like this. Yay, scales. Don't you just feel touched by my music? No, you don't, because it doesn't sound like music, it sounds like scales up and down. So what you can do is shorten it down, and you could take an octave even. So what's an octave? It's between two of the notes. So here, if I take the B string, so string number 2, and I take the 8, 7, 5, and then on the G string, I do 7, 5, 4, and then 7, 5 on the D string. That's one octave. And my goal is, especially with these major scales where you've got a lot going on, is to be able to play and make things sound nice and make melodies just within that octave. And do it by ear almost. So you get to noodling. So, and then pause on a note. Ooh, let's see what that sounds like. And play around with that small octave area. Play around when there's no backing track on, and improvise. This is what improvising should be about, is like taking small parts of your guitar, limiting yourself, and then actually improvising. Now, when you first improvise, it might suck, and you might go, I can't do that because I need to learn more. And actually, you probably do. But you also need to improvise more, because improvising starts with doing. Look at this video now. I am improvising for you right now. And the more you do the improvising on your guitar, the more you do the playing, the better you will get. And it involves a lot of sucking, but that's okay. Just kind of embrace it and get used to that. So taking small areas on the guitar, and then what I would do is take that small area and do it over a backing track. So once you get a chord or a long backing track, you could even do a backing track of your own. So I'm a big fan of like long, slow chords. So you can make a backing track of E minor, for instance. I'm doing E minor because when I solo, I can then leave the E string ringing. So I can leave the E string ringing because now my ear can have context. But you don't have to do it. That's just my example. The way I do this with all sorts of different keys is on my phone, I take the voice recorder app on my phone. I'll play a chord in for a long time, or two chords that I want to get good at, and I will learn to solo over those chords in the key. So if you're not sure why this works, the reason it works is because when you learn a scale, so I was playing the E minor chord, but I was playing the E minor scale over the top of it. Now, the E minor chord is the home chord, the chord that makes you feel like you're in the key of E minor from that key. It's chord 1. We're getting a little bit theory-based right now, and that's okay, but this is the sound. This is what sounds like home chord. So the main thing I want to be able to solo over in E minor is this chord. So to solo in E minor, the simplest way, for example, is with the pentatonic scale, which is 0, 3, 0, 2, 0, 2, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 3. I'll do that again. 0, 3, 0, 2, 0, 2, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 3. And so you play a chord. So the idea is you have to start attempting to make music that comes from you, comes from your head. These scales, they're just chosen notes, chosen frequencies by some old dudes way back in the day, some very clever dudes back in the day that chose these frequencies. But in order to make music with them, these are just pitches. Without you experimenting with them and playing with them, you won't begin to get your fingers around the language of guitar, and you won't start to express the thoughts you have from your own head. And even if those thoughts at first you think, oh, well, this sounds rubbish and the music, it doesn't sound good, it gets better the more you do it. All right? So the next thing that I think is a good idea is complete improvisation. So no scales allowed at all. You set a timer for 2 minutes. You can even hit record on your phone, hit record for it, and you do complete improvisation. So this is not specifically about scales, but this is complete improvisation. So strengthening your improvising muscle. And you just hit record and see what happens for 2 minutes on the guitar. So you might find that you have no idea what to play. And so you start playing. Pick a note. Okay. And you start experimenting with playing improvised pieces on the guitar. Any kind of improvisation. It might be that you go to chords. It might be that you do some tapping on the guitar. Anything's fine. But you need to strengthen that creative muscle because you need to build your creative confidence around improvising with scales, with not scales, with connecting what's up here with your guitar. And I love the 2 minutes a day improvise into a voice recorder. Don't worry about listening back to it. It's just about committing to that, like, oh no, what could happen that makes a big difference with this. So that's a really cool exercise. The last thing is to take these scales and start making them sound good. Is you got to keep your brain engaged when you're practicing those scales, and you got to find ways of doing them musical. If you practice them and they sound like rubbish, and you're surprised when you get soloing and it sounds like rubbish, don't be surprised, or you kind of get what you practice with this stuff. So a nice thing to do is when you're practicing scales is take whatever scale pattern you're working on, like this G we did earlier on, and put some rhythm to it. So think, okay, so the simplest one is instead of going da 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 da, let's put some musical rhythm to it. So an easy one would be like a swung rhythm. So da 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 da. So okay, so that's one rhythm. What if I took a different rhythm? I could take one a bit more interesting. Da 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 da. Okay, so this is ways to make your scales sound good. Please, if you're just kind of figuring out learning scales, it's okay to make scales sound bad too. You have to make them sound bad to get good. But then I feel like people get stuck in the idea that if you learn scales, you're going to be a really good guitarist. And it's like, no, you have to learn the scales. There ain't no ways about it, but you can make them sound good before you know how to play every single which place on the guitar. And it's part of your musical progress. So I hope this helps. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like button, hit subscribe. Please get this information out there. I think it's really helpful to a lot of guitar players. I've been Darryl Powis, and I will see you next time I do videos twice a week on fretboard and guitar. Thank you.